Morgan, the feature writer for the San Antonio Marriage Initiative, and I am so pleased today to introduce you to Dr. George Kenworthy. Dr. K, as I call him, was a senior pastor for various churches until 2006, when he became the founder and president of Two Restored, a marriage and family ministry. He has been featured on Family Life Today broadcasts and was noted as Best of the Best in 2007 and 2011. He's also been on Focus on the Family, as well as a frequent guest on radio stations in the Twin Cities. He's earned 2 master's degrees and completed work on 2 doctorates, one in Hebrew Scriptures and Philosophy, and the other in Persuasion and Oral Communication. He is the author of 2 books, Marriage Makeover and Before the Last Resort, 3 Simple Questions to Rescue Your Marriage. Okay, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my privilege.
Well, I just wanted us to get started with kind of you and your background. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to stop being a pastor after more than 3 decades and begin Two Restored and its mission?
Well, I blame this all on my wife. In 2006, I was happy being a pastor, and I was teaching at Bethel Seminary, 2 things I really enjoyed doing. And she challenged me to write a book on marriage. And I promptly said, I don't have the credentials to write a book on marriage, thinking that would do it. And my wife quickly responded, well, then I guess the book can't be about you and your credentials then, can it?
Good wife.
And so the first book was Marriage Makeover, that Family Life produced. And then they got it in 1,400 Walmarts across the United States. And then the first appearance on Focus on the Family occurred after that. And then things kind of went viral after that.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the Before the Last Resort, because that kind of has 2 components, right? Something for somebody in their marriage gleaned from all of your experience. And then I want to talk about the second part. But let's talk about the first part just for a little bit, because you've had so much experience counseling couples and you've got a lot of good things to say.
Well, the first part of the book is centered around what we call power stories. I'd like to think I've spent a lot of time studying Greek and Hebrew and a variety of other languages. I'd like to think that the strength of the book is my knowledge of the Bible and my abilities in Greek and Hebrew, but I know better than that. It's the stories. It's what God did to save the lives of people who were in hopeless marriages. So the first part is, I have at the end of every chapter, the one thing, if you remember the old Billy Crystal film, what's the one thing you can do? So there's a focus on one thing that you can do practically to make your marriage better. But then the emphasis in each chapter are amazing stories of what God did to save marriages. So that's what the first part of the book is about. So I guess that's it for the first part.
Well, and one of the premises of the book really is inviting God into your marriage, and you kind of have three principles.
Yes.
Could you go through those real quick for us?
Yeah. Well, the title of the book is three questions that can rescue your marriage, and so the questions are listed in what seems to be in logical order. I'm not even sure if I said this to you, Amy, but the second question was the first one for me. It's where it started. I'm a Greek and Hebrew guy, as I mentioned, and my doctoral work at Iowa and my second master's degree at Trinity Seminary were all Bible stuff. And so I went and I was a pastor preaching the Bible. That's what I did. But then I had couples that I was seeing whose marriages were falling apart. And I cried out to God, wanting to know what I could do, because I felt like as a pastor, then like I do is say I could pray for you, but then the marriages were still falling apart. And I had one of these God moments where I clearly heard the voice of God saying, okay, George, do you believe the Bible? Well, yes, Lord, I preach it every week. And then there was this clear message. Well, then tell the folks whose marriages are falling apart to believe the Bible too. Now, I struggle with that, trying to figure out what does that really mean until I realized, well, the Bible has lots of principles, a lot of truth about how to live our lives, and lots of advice to couples about what they can do. And of course, anybody who knows the Bible at all knows that the Bible clearly indicates in Malachi, God hates divorce. Jesus in Matthew 19, it also strongly encourages folks to stay married. But there are a lot of behavioral tools and other sorts of things I hadn't really thought about as it related to the Bible. So it was like God was daring me to practice what I preached with couples. Now, that led me to the book of Ephesians, which now we're backing up to the first question. And the book of Ephesians in chapter 1 says that God has, all strength, all power, all might in heavenly places available to those of us who are ready to ask for it. And that struck me that, a lot of the problem that we have in marriage is our God's too small. He's not big enough to be able to do what he says in the book of Ephesians. So the first question then uh, is do you believe that God is a creator God who has creative power to help you when you're stuck? So it begins there because most folks I see or have seen over the years, they feel stuck. I'm a pastor, so most of the folks I've seen have been Christians, and Christians get stuck and they give up and they don't know what to do. Well, God's never ever stuck, and so I ask folks, "Do you believe that?" And most, when I ask that question, say, "Well, yeah, we believe it. It's just practically we're not acting as if we believe it." But so that's the first question. Then the second question is, "Do you believe the Bible is God's word? It has relevant issues for your life?" And that's that, as I said, where it started with me. And then the third question. Uh, is that if we believe that God has creative power when we're stuck, and if we are ready to do what the Bible says, do we also acknowledge that the Spirit of God can give us strength we don't have? So we're not up to ourselves to try the best we can on our own to save our own marriages. There's a spiritual power that can change everything. And so that's the third question. God tells you that you got this spiritual power. Are you ready to pray for it? Because clearly, right now, feeling stuck and hopeless, you don't have it. So those are the three questions.
Well, and I know the question I asked you when I looked at the book and wrote up on it was, would somebody, like you mentioned, these are being sold in Walmarts, these are available on Amazon, these are available all over. Would someone who doesn't really profess a Christian faith, would they find, would they be willing to agree to this? And you said yes.
Yeah.
Explain for our marriage champions why you found that to be true.
Well, when we are desperate, any of us who are desperate, whether you're a believer or not a believer, you're looking for lifelines. And what I've learned over the years is that one of our best resources we call ambassadors of hope. Ambassadors of hope are your marriage champions who have a story to tell about what happened in their life, what happened in their marriage. That is more believable, particularly in this day and age of social media where we're driven by what our friends think. So if I have a powerful story of what God did, people are looking for that because when they're hopeless, they're going to turn any place they can. And so yeah, these things work because when you can tell somebody, here's an ambassador of hope you can talk to who is in the same place you are in or are in currently at one point, but then God did something for them that is amazing. Would you be willing to hear their story? And I generally, when I offer that up, the answer is always yes, because people that are desperate, they don't believe in God, they're looking for some kind of solution to their problem, and they will hear it. And so, for us to say, well, God has a lifeline for you. Would you consider it? It's like, well, they're looking for anything they can. So it's not been a problem, and we've seen a number of people that were not Christians when we started that came to Christ through the process of what we've done.
So that's like a double blessing. They
Yes,
saved their marriage and came to Christ, the
yes,
ultimate goal. Yeah, I remember you telling me too that people kind of expect the church to be a place to provide help
yes.
in times of trouble, so they're not turned off by turning to something at a church or turning to a
Well,
Christian.
because you go to a pastor, you expect a pastor to believe in God, and if a pastor introduces prayer or the power of prayer, that's not a surprise. That's what he's supposed to do. I have a friend of mine here in the Twin Cities, a pastor by the name of Dave Gibson, who is in the habit of when he goes to the restaurants or he's in a taxi cab, he'll ask people that he doesn't know, "How can I pray for you?" That seemed forward until I started doing it myself. But I have done that, with regularity. And I went into an A&W on one occasion, and the waitress came up and I said, "We're about to bless our food. How can we pray for you?" And she mentioned that she had a daughter that was ill, and we could pray for that daughter. That'd be great. It's like, well, we'll do that. So my wife and I prayed for that daughter. I didn't think anything more about it. A year later, we're back in Michigan. I live in Minnesota. We're back in Michigan visiting folks again. Went to the same A&W. the same waitress came up to wait on us. I didn't recognize her. And she looked at us and said, "Oh my gosh, you're the individual that prayed for me a year ago. That prayer changed my life." And it's like,
Wow.
seriously, wow. So, yeah, we do find that the world around us who doesn't claim to know Jesus, they do respond when we can say there's a power that those of us who know Christ can contact that you can use too. So,
That was your own personal power story.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just like some of them in the book. Well, the second part of the book has a little bit of a different focus, and I think that's something that our marriage champions are going to be really interested in. So let's first talk about that second part of the book, and then we'll talk about where it's gone from there.
Sure. Well, the second part of the book actually developed through what was going on with the first book. Marriage Makeover was the name of the first book. People were buying the book and then giving it to their non Christian friends, 25 to 35 or thereabouts, who are anticipating getting a divorce. So a lot of people were doing that because they thought the material was helpful to people outside the church. So Family Life came back to me and said, when you write the second book, which is a remake of Marriage Makeover, can you target somebody who's not a believer, who doesn't go to church, doesn't understand Christianese, but can appreciate these principles? And I said, sure, I can do that. And then, since the motivation for the second book was to help all these believers who are giving the book to the unbelievers, can we have a guide in the back of the book, so that if you're helping your friend who doesn't know Christ, uh, there's a guide that can help them go through the book practically and apply the truths of the book to your unbelieving friends. So that's what the last part of the book is. It's a friend's guide that is set up so that you want to help your friend or your son or your daughter, or anybody for that matter. You can go through the book with this guide that's going to get you down to practical behavioral tools that your friend or loved one can use to help save their marriage. So that's what the second part of the book is about.
Well, and I think, for marriage champions, especially, I'm sure you're identifying with this. I know I personally have this experience on more than one occasion. A friend or a loved one comes to you and confesses they're unhappy in their marriage, and especially when it's we don't want to discount the really hard problems, and we'll talk about those later. But there's a lot of those little things that add up into the bigger things, but there's still a lot of room to do something about them, and you're looking at your friend kind of like a deer in the headlights, and you wish you knew what to say, and you hope you know what to say. And this book can really help that. And then you've created a program that even goes further, and you
Mhm.
have recently redone that. So let's talk about your friend to friend program, because I think that's just a perfect fit for our marriage champions here.
Yeah, the idea of the friend to friend program is predicating on a number of assumptions. Well, not even some of them aren't even assumptions. Some of them are facts. It's a fact today that people are going to go to a family member or friend with any kind of a problem before they're going to go to a professional counselor or a pastor or somebody who's a paid professional. So knowing that's the case, it's not a matter of, do I want to sign up, to be a marriage champion. It's like you're in a position, whether you like it or not, to influence the marriages of the people that you know. So, you can either be good at it or you can be bad at it, but it's not a question of whether you're going to do it, because you're going to do it, one or another. So the idea behind this is we're all in a position to do this, and most of us don't know how to do it well, because we have a tendency either to be on the boys' team or the girls' team. And if we're on the girls' team, for example, we go to our girlfriend, "Oh, you poor thing, I feel so badly for you." And yeah, so you're married to a jerk. I'm married to a jerk too. We all know what those jerk husbands are like. And we do that sort of thing that may make the wife feel good, but it does nothing to direct them to the counsel of God's word or to save the marriage. So the idea is, if we can get in the hands of ordinary folks some tools that they can use, as well as some language they can use in helping their friends. Well, they can be a link in a chain to actually help a neighbor or a friend get their marriage restored.
So that kind of started with part of the end of the book, and then you developed this whole training program
Yes.
called Friend to Friend, and you used to go and teach this at churches and different places, but then you've just recently redone it. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, we started with this friend to friend training in 2003. I don't even know if you knew that. I was checking old records and I go back to 2003. My first manual I wrote in 2004. So we've had a manual on how to help, friends whose marriage is in trouble since 2004. Dr. Amanda Horton is a part of our team, and she's helped with a rewrite of the new manual. She joined our staff in about 2010, and then after she joined the staff, we started doing a remake of things that I did earlier. And so 2015, we created a new and better manual, well, a couple of manuals. And then we started going around the country doing trainings with those manuals. But it was always something where Amanda or myself or one of our staff had to be there to lead it. What's different now is we've moved into the digital age,
Yeah.
and your listeners, if they know Sammy, should know that it was at the impetus of Carl Caton from Sammy that all this happened, because he knew about our products, had seen us do some training, for Sammy, and said, you get this in a digital format. And I was motivated by that and said, yeah, let's do it. So then, we started working on the revising of the old manual. The graphics were not great, and it's Sammy graphic artists that made them really look great. And then there was a friend of mine here in the Twin Cities who does featured films. And so he started doing digital media, that's film quality stuff that's just exciting. So Mahoney Media became a part of this. And then more recently, Family Life, my publisher, decided they're going to change their strategy for what they do in Family Life. It used to be Weekend to Remember conferences and the radio program. Now, still doing that, but they're focusing on a local emphasis. And the local emphasis is helping a neighbor be the Good Samaritan. So how can I be a good Samaritan to my neighbor? Well, it begins where I better know my neighbor's names, and some of us don't know the names of our neighbors. And then you got to know something about them. If you're going to be a good Samaritan, you got to know, how can I help them? I got to know how they hurt. And in the process of learning how they hurt, we're going to find out that some of them are hurting in their families. And so Family Life is looking to implement this strategy worldwide. And so, we're in the process of partnering with them to utilize this, and there'll be lots of communities across the United States where we're going to be introducing this soon.
Yeah, and it's going to be available too on your website.
That's
So for
correct.
marriage champions who want to, look at the program, see how you can be that friend to friend, how you can, take the training and learn, or bring the training to your church, so that lay people have a better answer than just that. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I mean, I know I've felt that, and again, too, like you said, you don't want to jump on anyone's team. You've got some really good exercises in that manual that teach you how to respond in a more constructive way.
Yeah. Well, the hope all along was for anybody anywhere to be able to do this. So, Amanda and I don't have to come to a community to do a training. We have a leader's guide that you guys help us put together, so that anybody who can read a book and who has friends that they can invite to a meeting, they can do one of these trainings. So we try to set up the leader's manual as kind of I hate, those old things we used to have with MS DOS for dummies. That's insulting to say we got a marriage book for dummies. But the idea is we try to anticipate anything that someone who's never done this before would ask. So it's all in the manual, and then you just walk through it. And then, of course, as far as the training, it's all digital. So Amanda and I are doing the kinds of things we would do if we came, to a community. But it's digital. So you stream these 6 videos to wherever you are, in a small group or a church setting or whatever it happens to be at your home. And then the leader's guide will, as a leader, walk you through what you need to do step by step as you take your participants through it. And then there's a participants guide for all the participants, so that they can have notes and the exercises and everything right in front of them. So yeah.
Do you want to go over a few of the topics? Just maybe one or two, like you said, to keep you from jumping onto somebody's team. I know that was one of them, right? It was to kind of check your own default way you might handle something.
Yeah, well, we have it's laid out first of all in kind of identifying the problem. So session one is the problem, And the problem any pastor or any of us in the church knows there are a lot of folks in church who are facing crisis in their marriage, but you can't help them because there's somebody leaning out of the marriage that won't go for marriage counseling. And so, what are you going to do if you got this wonderful church couple that refuse to get help because one of them doesn't want any help? It's like, I'm just done and whatever. And so, we've been lost as a church as to know how to handle that kind of couple. And for the most part, we don't do much. You come alongside the one that looks like they are the believer and still, wanting to be committed to their marriage. And then we tend to demonize the leaning out spouse because if they really were doing what God wanted to do, they would get marriage counseling. And then in the process of demonizing the leaning out spouse, we actually make it worse because there's some effective things you can do when you have a couple like that. That's what we call a mixed agenda couple. To be more assured that you can help them. So anyway, that's lesson one is all about those sorts of things and making sure we don't alienate people who are thinking, I don't know, I want to stay married. And then after that, we use the acronym PLEDGE. The first thing is prayer, and you can say, well, duh, for us as Christians, of course you're going to pray. But I'm convinced as a conservative Bible believing pastor that the 10 spies out of Joshua are alive and well in every church. And you know the story of the 10 spies. They're the ones that were believers, but they went in the land and they're giants in the land. And you can say, well, what was the problem? Well, their God wasn't big enough to take on the giants. And so they gave up. And I fear within our communities, there are a lot of folks that are like that. And part of the problem is we don't have enough power stories, to be able to show our God is big enough. And hopefully as people, read the Before the Last Resort, they can see God did some pretty amazing things for some couples that I talk about in the book. And then with that, maybe we can believe our God is big enough to do that for me too. But anyway, so prayer is essential for us as part of that question. One, is our God still a creative God, a power God who can help us when we're stuck? And then L and pledge is the next one, and that's listen. And it's not just a matter you got to be a good listener. Uh, that's where the default stuff comes in, where in relating to a spouse, or I mean a spouse, rather a friend, we sometimes can make it about me. So someone tells your story, and oh, I got a story just like that, and we get off on how their story is just like my story, and oftentimes unwittingly we're making things worse instead of better. Or one of my defaults is being overly sympathetic. We have 5 different kinds of defaults, but as a pastor, we're trained to be sympathetic. And if you've got a mixed agenda couple as a pastor, we're going to be sympathetic to that person still coming to church. And we may not know we're doing this, but then have a bad attitude toward the one that doesn't want to do the marriage counseling and isn't coming to church anymore. And we're unaware of how our being overly sympathetic can actually hurt a marriage that we really are praying gets restored. So anyway, we have 3 other defaults that we talk about, but that's what we do in that chapter. I don't know how much you want me to go into this. Express hope is another one that's next in pledge. And hopelessness is the biggest thing we face. We talk about that a bit. And then there are a number of default myths that we have. And some of it is, if it's hopeless, what are you going to do? And hopelessness is the thing I see. Or what we hear a lot is, well, I don't love my spouse anymore. Since I don't love my spouse, I can't believe that God wants me to stay married to somebody I don't love and I don't think loves me. Well, that's a myth. And so we identify a number of myths in that section that are common. And then for the person going through the training, help them know, what can you say when your friend is showing one of these myths. So that's the kind of stuff that's in the training.
I love that because you just want to say something that's not the wrong thing. I mean, I think there are a lot of right things to say, but you want to so you're not just limited to, oh, I've got to say just the right thing, because that's kind of a fear too of a marriage champion. But
Yeah.
you also, it kind of takes away some of that fear that you have to say just the right thing. but it also helps you go, oh, okay, now that would be an area to stay away from.
Yeah.
And just really gives you that power. I love that you talked about the leaning in and the leaning out spouse, though, because that's another concept that you've been really instrumental at developing there at To Restored. We've got a few minutes. Could you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about some of those? Maybe we can talk about some of these hard problems and soft problems and
Yeah.
leaning in and leaning out, because every couple in crisis is not the same. People
Yeah.
are looking at people are facing different things.
Yeah, this one tool that I talk about, that's our best tool. And our best tool that I tell anybody, we have a bunch of tools. We have, I don't know, 80 tools or something, but our best tool is when you're stuck. God is never stuck. So here's what you do. You go to the God of the universe and say, Lord, I'm stuck. Don't read Kenworthy's book. Don't, I mean, well, they can if they want, but when you're stuck, you're better off saying, God, help me. I'm stuck. Show me what to do. Uh, and the reason I feel so strongly about that is that virtually everything in this book, everything in this training has come from me being stuck and not knowing what to do, including the whole concept. It was probably 1990 or something. As a pastor, might even been earlier than that. I was recognizing this problem that I identified, where there are people in the church you can't help because they won't come to counseling, and then you see their prayer requests every week. Oh, pray for my marriage. My husband is not, he's not doing what he should do, and he, not working out. And so you pray, you pray, you pray. On one occasion, I had one of my parishioners that every week was asking me to pray for their husband. I finally got to the point where it's like, okay, I've had enough praying for him. I'm going to go talk to him.
Yeah.
And when she found that out, she said, "Oh, no, 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 no. If you go, I mean, he has this aversion to the church and this almost near hatred of pastors. Don't do that." So it's all right. So I prayed for another year, and then again, it was just unsettled. We're not making progress here. So I invited the guy to go out fishing with me, and I put him in the end of the boat. We were, in Colorado. We're doing some trout fishing. I knew where the trout were because I do a lot of trout fishing. So I put him in a boat where the trout were, and I knew they were, and made sure he caught a lot of fish. And then the original agenda is just going to have some fun. Make sure he outfishes me because it's being in the right spot helps.
Yeah.
Uh, and he loved it. And eventually, he started opening up about his life and opening about his marriage, opening up about his kids. And there was a genuine opportunity to make a difference. But anyway, the idea is this whole hopeful spouse came out of me being stuck and not knowing what to do, and God helped me. So we started with this, developing a whole plan for the hopeful spouse. What do you do if you're a hopeful spouse and your husband or wife won't, do marriage counseling? Well, with that, you can't do marriage counseling. You work on the hopeful spouse and help that hopeful spouse become a better person, a better parent, better able to relate to this dissenting spouse that isn't interested, and then wait and see what God does. And in many cases, we saw individuals come to Christ as a process of that, saw marriages come together. So anyway, that's where it all started years ago. But to the whole leaning in, leaning out, it started with that. I'm trying. I've lost your other question. It seemed like there
No,
were
well,
two questions.
I was going to kind of have you maybe define what the leaning in spouse is and what the leaning out, and then maybe about some hard and soft
Oh,
problems.
sure, sure. That hard and soft. That's what I. So the leaning in spouse, of course, is the one that will come to us in the church and say, "I really want to save my marriage. My husband and wife is kind of checking out, and I don't want to check out. I want this marriage to work." That's the leaning in spouse. The leaning out spouse is the one who's, they've kind of given up hope. They're not so sure they want to stay marriage. The wrinkle in this, as we've seen over the years, is that sometimes when that leaning out spouse is ready to engage, the leaning in spouse becomes our biggest problem. Because what we found is, if the leaning out, say your spouse has had an affair, and the leaning in spouse wants to save the marriage, the leaning out spouse wants to get together with their lover. I've seen that a lot. And so the leaning out spouse, finally, God gets a hold of their heart. They give up the lover. They're ready to come back in. What I've seen is, if the leaning in spouse now sees themselves as basically innocent, because they're not the one that had the affair, and basically sees they don't have much of anything to change. So they come in as judge, jury, and executioner of this cheater, that cheated on the marriage. Then those marriages, we have difficulty seeing God save, because it takes two people ultimately say, "Lord, change me." help me to see what I need to do. So it's not like the leaning in spouse has nothing to do. They need to recognize there's changes they need to make too. But you get them both at the point where we're ready to work, then the success rate goes off the chart. So, and as far as the hard problems we call the triple A club: uh, adultery, abuse, and addiction. Those up the ante for anybody, including professional counselors. But if they read the book, they'll find that in my experience, a lot of experience with adultery, and that never stopped God from saving marriages. So we're not saying that if they're part of this AAA club, those marriages can't be saved, but it's just more difficult. The key thing that your listeners need to know is that soft reasons are the primary reasons why people get a divorce, and soft reasons are everything else. I don't love my spouse, and they're not meeting my needs, and I mean, whatever else we say that's not adultery, abuse, or addiction. We've done lots of research in the secular counseling methods. I continue to read all the best books I can find, whether they're Christian or not, on what's going on. As you look at the secular counselors who only do marriage and family stuff, so they don't do anything else, and that's rare. Most counselors can't can't eat if they only do marriage and family stuff. They do other things, but those are exclusively focused on this, and the research specialists, they are enjoying about an 86% success rate. These are people who don't know Christ necessarily. The 86% rate, and you think, boy, in the church, if we had that kind of success rate, we could be shouting from the rafters about the goodness of God and marriages being saved, but we don't, because typically our success rate isn't that high. Anyway, what they will do is to say, if you have a soft reason why your marriage is in trouble, every one of those marriages should be able to be saved, and they believe that. And so, since soft reasons are the primary reasons why even people in the church get a divorce, you can say, well, you don't have to believe God here; just believe the secular experts who say there's no reason why anybody for a soft reason should get a divorce. And then if you bring God in the equation, the power of prayer, the power of God, it's like our hopes ought to be really, really high for what can happen in the church and through the church in changing the divorce culture in America.
Well, and that is just a great inspiration for our marriage champions. And you've got just the resources to help them have some better answers and some ways to point their friends to some help. So thank you so much, Dr.
Oh,
K.
you're welcome.
I could talk to you forever, but it's time for us to go. So thank you so much for being
Oh,
with
you're
us.
welcome. Always a privilege to be with you.
Oh, we love it. And marriage champions, if you want to connect further with Dr. Kenworthy and To Restored, you can always find us at samarriage.org.